Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hardcore Metal Detecting Radio Show. I'm Derek Asklar. Craig Talley's on the line there. We'll be hosting this show tonight. I'm going to have kind of open lines tonight, I believe, and our phone number is 352-504-4170 if you'd like to call in and bring up a topic you want to talk about. I already see Peter Beaufoy from New Zealand on tonight on chat there. Hello, Peter. And the other guys will be following in here in suit, it seems like, I haven't had much happen today, Craig. I did have kind of an exciting morning, though. But I got up and I usually have my coffee out on the porch out back, and watch the little wildlife running around, rabbits and all that stuff. And got out of the corner of my eye and seen the shadow, because we have a sunshade along the side of our patio right there, and you can kind of see through it. It's not to block rain, or the wind can go through, but you can't really see through it real good. Especially in the morning hours, and I saw this shadow go by, and I said, man, it's about the size of a horse, it seemed like, walking in front of it. It just kind of startled me, and the 4-point buck, like maybe 20 feet away from me. I'm sitting there having my coffee, trying to get to my cell phone, and I got a couple of pictures of it, and I was trying to Instagram it. Of course, Craig, I'm figuring that thing out, but I took a little video, and then there comes a doe walking right out behind him, and got cowbirds landing. I'm like, man, I walked in the house and told Pauline, I said, it seems like a little wonderland out there. We got rabbits and squirrels, and now we have deer coming in there, which kind of surprised me. We only have an acre, but we hadn't really had deer or coyotes or anything come up that close. They usually stay right there at the property line, but yeah, they just kind of walk pretty as you please right through there. And I think I startled them more than me. I mean, they sat there and looked at me. They could tell something was there, but I wasn't moving around or nothing like that. Yeah, this is kind of a neat thing to happen. I haven't had it happen here. I see them out on the street, walking down the road, because we live on a dead-end road. But never right there in the yard by you. Kind of like you and your groundhog friend, right? I know your groundhog steps out every once in a while.
Yeah, it's a new one now, and it's up in my shed, and I saw the neighbor next door. They don't live there, but they come by to cut the grass. So I went over and talked to him, and first thing he asked me, seen no groundhog, because his house has been invaded. I mean, they got holes right next to the foundation, that are big as a bicycle rim practically, and those suckers can move rocks like you wouldn't believe. They're strong. But he took me down to the bottom of the house one time, and there's an actual cistern there that dates back to like 1740 or something, for the cabin that's in there. But they put up this plexiglass thing, and they said that to keep the groundhogs from getting down in there, they had their nest down there, and all of a sudden, the thing just smacked it, just knocked the glass up and just goes right under it. But
we have armadillos down here. We don't have the groundhogs, but they don't burrow in the ground like groundhogs do, but they will dig for bugs and stuff like that. And we had the concrete steps on our old place, and it came home, didn't even realize that he undermined one side of the concrete steps, digging around in there for ants or whatever the heck they're looking for, and stepped on that thing, ended up right on my butt. The whole side of this big, concrete thing just kind of leaned right over. They had a hole dug underneath there, and that's about the only thing we deal with. We have moles, but we don't have groundhogs like you guys do up north. I was born and raised up there for the most part, so I know what you're talking about, Craig. But the armadillos here, man, I don't know.
The groundhogs don't like real hot weather. They kind of hibernate. They do hibernate in the winter. I'd never seen them up close, and we got here, and there was two underneath our shed, and then we kind of started, scaring them every chance we got, and they started running over the other people's yard, but they've been over there for years. But he got two of them last year in the spring with a crossbow.
Yeah. I know in Indiana they used to eat those things. I mean, I've had them before.
Yeah.
Groundhog actually like a big old squirrel anyway, really.
he went down to the police station and told them he wanted to shoot these groundhogs, and they go, "Oh my God, you can't do it with a gun in the city, you know, and or in the town."
Yeah,
and so he goes, "Well, how about a crossbow?" And they go, "Yeah, that might work." And so he goes, "Okay."
Well, they do it down here with gators and stuff and hogs, wild hogs, down there near Tampa, New Tampa or whatever. My mom lives down there in a housing addition thing, and they've called out the hog hunters and stuff, and they come out with crossbows and set traps, but they can't use firearms at all. And I hate to tell them, with crossbow, even crossbows are, being an archery hunter or whatever, deer hunter, you can get an arrow to go right through a sandbag, but not a bullet. So I don't know which one's safer or not, but they make them use crossbows and stuff,
yeah,
which is fine.
Well, he thought he and his son got this high-powered air gun,
right?
And so he ended up getting one too, and he said he's thinking about bringing that down, and he said that thing is. My friend is into all that. He was a sergeant in the Army, and he said, there's guys on YouTube that they do this night hunting with these scopes, and they're knocking off these groundhogs or prairie dogs, I guess, from like half a mile. You know,
pretty powerful.
I mean, it's unbelievable how hard. I mean, these things, like, it's almost more powerful than a gunpowder gun.
It's like a 22, really. I have one actually. My
they
dad bought one, but you pump it up once, boom, it's ready to go.
Well, they also got different calibers.
Oh, do they? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they got up to 45 caliber.
I try to leave everything.
Go ahead.
They
probably have machine guns.
I have no doubt somebody come up with something crazy anyway. Yeah, no, usually I don't have to shoot anything out here unless it's an aggressive thing, kind of. But we pretty much leave everything alone out here. But those armadillos I bought, man, they do so much damage underneath the shed, and they'll get into stuff. I mean, but I don't know. You can kind of scare them once you scare them a few times. They usually kind of stay away. But we put these live traps out for them, and they're so dumb, Craig. You don't even have to put food in them. Just find out what path they're coming in into your yard. You just set the thing there, and they're not smart. They walk right into the stupid trap, and you just take them. I take them down the road over here to the little woodsy area and let them loose. I don't know if you're allowed to do it or not, but I just go ahead and do it because they'll just tear up your yard and everything. Start digging holes and leaving open holes. Matter of fact, Pauline almost fell in one time. She goes, "You got to fill in your holes. You didn't fill in the hole over here." I said, "Yeah, I did. It's a groundhog, or not a groundhog, but an armadillo."
it was really a dig hole, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I don't like stepping in my dig holes. Yeah, I was doing that test garden over here along the side, and I was detecting it. Man, God, Craig, my yard is so trashed that there's so much trash in it. It seems like, and I don't even know how I spent 6 days detecting a 20 by 20 area, trying to get everything I could out of there. And she says, "Man, our yard looks like a rototiller hit it." I said, "Nah, it's just that one spot." And I started burying stuff, and then of course I decided to move it over to the other side of the yard. And now I got 2 test gardens, kind of. So I didn't want to dig this stuff back out of the ground again. But
yeah, I think if I make one, I'm going to put like pieces of limestone on top of the ground to mark it. Yeah,
I was using bricks, those regular sand bricks or whatever. And I was taking permanent marker and putting if it's a quarter, a cue at 6 inches, 8 inches, writing it on the block and embedding the block in the ground a little bit right there. I've seen guys do it with PVC pipe too. It's not a bad idea. Taking a cap from and a little piece of PVC and pound it in the ground right there. That way you don't hit it with a lawnmower and you can still see it stands out enough. At least you know where your targets are to begin with. But it's important to have test gardens too. I mean, we always tell people that start out with any metal detector, really, even the one you've been using, and pick a few areas in your yard and bury some nickels, pennies, something like that, and that way you get an idea what your detectors are doing before you actually get them out there on a hunt. I mean, I try to do buy a detector and go right out hunting with it. You can, but I don't know. I just I just as soon sit there and mess with some settings and stuff like that, see what it's going to do, what it sounds like. And it's a good way to compare your detectors too. If you have something that detector A can get every time you buy a new one, well, you take it right over there and see if it'll do the same or better. So it makes sense to me anyways, trying to get a handle. It's like sighting in a rifle or whatever. You want to make sure you shoot it for a few times, make sure you know what you're doing with it. So I'll sight it in. But I haven't been out detecting in the last few days anyways. I know, Craig, you went out and found, what'd you tell me, a bullet or something like that you found today even, with those new settings you had.
Well, I put new settings in about 5 or 6 days ago in the Equinox, and I've always, when I first started, I used I used open screen, and the second target I dug was that token, down about 10 inches next to a spike or a chisel, big iron chisel. But I hadn't been using it. I'd just been running at zero discrimination instead of -9. That's the lowest you can go on the iron. And so I a couple days, 5 days ago, I decided, try that again. And I was also looking at a few videos and talking to a few people, and they were saying, try going down to 4 on the recovery speed, and you may even be able to get to 3, but it'll definitely give you more depth, and you just have to go, sweep slower and tighter, and which I do anyway. So, but anyway, I went in the front yard and in an area where I hadn't really dug much, and it was kind of a back away from the sidewalk, and the ground seemed kind of funny along there. It's kind of raised up a little higher. There's a fence, along there. My yard's weird. It's got all these fences all over the place because it's a double lot. But there's like another fence, and then there's a gate near the house to go into the backyard. But right along that fence, I just never found anything. And I went over there, and I got this. I was using the Bliss tool, and I got the Indian head penny, and I got a what was it? I got a 3-ringer over there.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got a 3-ringer. I remember that.
Yeah, and I'd used the same settings kind of that I'd used with the Mind Lab. Instead of using, like, I don't have tracking on the Bliss tools, and I was using tracking on the Mind Lab, and then I was using less iron. So I was, accepting more iron with the Bliss tool, and that's how I got those signals. So then I went back over, with the Mind Lab, and I actually, pulled 2 wheat pennies and a couple other things, and so we had like a couple days where it was so hot, it was unbelievable. So it's like 98 degrees, 97, 98 for 3 days, and the third day at night it rained like crazy. So next morning I went out to do some yard work, and it was like 54 degrees, 56 degrees, something like that. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So I cut the grass, and then I thought, man, in the afternoon it was still like 78. So I thought, man, I'm going to try those new settings again, and just, I cut the grass so it'll be easy to, get on the ground with it. So I go out there, and the first thing I got a 5 on the Equinox, and it was just locking on 5, and it was a nice little low tone, and probably just, it's kind of a moderate signal. And I was thinking, man, that's weird. I'd never heard, this area just wasn't, just nothing anything really coming out of this. Yeah. And so I dig down maybe 3 or 4 inches, and a little piece of lead. It looked like a lieutenant bar. That's what I thought it was. I saw it, but it was lead. But then when I turned it over, it looks like it had something for 2 attachments on the back. and then I got maybe 6 or 8 inches away. I got this, got a 14, and it was, it's hitting it, you know, it would read like maybe 8 times in a row, 14, then go to 13, then back to 14, so it was locking really, strongly. And I was thinking, oh, it might be a nickel, but to me, it almost didn't sound like a nickel.
Right.
So anyway, I dig down, and it's a tomback button, kind of a medium-sized one, and had a broken shank. And it was a little bit tilted in the ground, so but when I ran it over the meter, it was out of the ground. It was reading like 14, 15, and it was only like 4.5 inches down, but it was a little bit on edge. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then yesterday was too hot, so today I decided to go out. It was like 85, but it wasn't real humid. So I went. I kept watching the backyard, and then when the shade went over that little area that I was hunting the other day, I went out, and I didn't do like 10 swings, and I get this, numbers are jumping, from like, I think they were jumping like from 17 to 32, and
right.
But the signal itself, the sound was just, it sounded, it was like a mid-high tone. And I was thinking, man, that's a good signal there, regardless of what the numbers were reading, and so I'd go in all metal, and it was reading, I guess it was 8 inches, 7 or 8 inches. And so anyway, I dig down, and it was a infield bullet, and the like maybe, I don't know, a little bit of the end of the bullet had been cut off, and then the soldier, whatever, had cut like diagonally across the bottom of the bullet. It made 2 grooves, one on each side, and then pinched it. So I don't know. The only thing I can figure was maybe he was trying to make maybe a sinker out of the bullet or something. Because my friend Mike had found a 3-ringer nearby there about 1.5 years ago, maybe, that was the soldier had pounded the tip of the bullet flat and almost like squared it off and then drilled a hole through it. And I've seen a lot of those, a lot of water hunters around these camps find those in the creeks, where the soldiers were using them to fish. So I don't know. You find bullets a lot of times that the soldiers just whittled them. They cut like a big hunk out of them, or they cut the thing in half.
Yeah.
The soldiers, a lot of the soldiers were like teenagers, in their early 20s, and they were bored, sitting around camp in the middle of the winter for months.
Yeah.
So you find all kinds of stuff, whittled stuff, work pieces of lead. Some people made, animals and all kinds of stuff out of dice, chess pieces, checkers. You see pounded, round, pieces. It's got to be like for checkers or something.
Right.
Just messing around with it. You find a lot of melted lead in these winter camps too. It's just tons of melted lead, and people. I was, I never thought about it, but then somebody said, yeah, they used to start fires. They just take a bullet out of their cartridge box and the gunpowder. They just light it, under the fire, and it would start the fire for them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we got some thundering and stuff. Hang on just a second. I got some thundering and rain is pouring. So, if we all of a sudden go off air, it's just because of signal, and I'll have to get the show back up and running. Just takes a couple minutes, so check back if you do hear a fluctuation. Sometimes we get it'll knock the power out for a few seconds. That's what it usually does, and it'll come back on. So, Okay, I just wanted to tell them
Yeah,
that, Craig, so in case they don't have their
yeah,
chat up.
I can kind of hear it in the background a little bit.
Yeah, it'll get going here in a minute. We've had some hellacious electrical things going on lately. It just, as far as this lightning goes, it's just striking every which way. It'll get started here in a minute. Hopefully it doesn't, but the other day it was like one after another after another. It's like, good God. Yeah. But anyways, Craig, sorry I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's just, it's just interesting that, you find, it's kind of, you read about it like trench art, in World War II, and it's kind of the soldiers, during the Civil War did the same kind of things, like camp art or,
Fireside art.
Yeah. But I've even seen like little stars made out of lead.
Chess pieces, checkers, things. Poker chips or whatever.
But when we were hunting Breastplate Hill, I found a pounded bullet and another in a I think like a little cylinder that they'd made into a poker chip or something when we were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just what they had to use. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of lead, though. When you think about it, everybody digs, of course, bullets, but just the chunks of lead everywhere. I mean, even in Florida, I dig the stuff. How much lead is out there? So I say we're cleaning up the properties and getting that bad lead out of there.
Well, lead is very malleable.
Right.
You can make, they actually made tobacco pipes stuff out of with lead. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And the Romans had pipe. Their water pipes were lead.
Well, some places in the States it was. I mean, they used lead as a sealer, and I think didn't they have lead pipes at some time, Craig? Here, I don't know. It's been a long time ago.
I don't know.
I know they got rid of a lot of the black water pipe, and anytime they build with something else and they realize it's not good for you or whatever, well, look at asbestos. I mean, that stuff, won't burn this and that and the other thing, but it'll kill you and give you cancer and everything else. They used to make, tile floors with it and insulation and, oh, God, everything. That stuff's some bad stuff. But, yeah, you get, that lead, it leaches, too. Some places, some cities, even over here in the States, I mean, Chicago, I think was one of them, had an extremely high, or maybe it was Detroit. I can't remember. There's a big news article about it and stuff. They were saying the lead levels were really high in some part up there, just from the industry and everything. So, hopefully that's not. It's probably going right. Can you hear it, Craig? Thundering and everything?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Okay, it's not too bad, though. I got to turn the mic down if I have to. Yeah, it just gets going out there. But, yeah, it's amazing how much stuff we do find, though. I find a lot of those old, I don't even know what they're made of. It looks like a carbide or something like that. The batteries, the old-fashioned ones, they're like a metal that your detector kind of wants to go over and hit, give you a signal on, but it kind of breaks up. They're like cylinders. They kind of look like octagon shape. Somebody told me they were batteries, old the insides of a battery or something like that. I find those a lot.
I find in the dirt, it doesn't make a signal, but I find those little graphite tubes that I guess go in batteries or something.
Right. It's from.
I didn't really know. I didn't really know what they were at first, but.
Yeah, somebody told me I didn't know what they were either. I was finding them all over, and I think the ones I was finding was from like a flashlight or early flashlight or something, or maybe it was from some kind of battery for a car or something. I don't know, but they're like graphite, almost like pressed powdered graphite or something like that, and some of them have the little electrode at the end of them, or a little piece of, where you can hook up the wire to it. But most of them you just find there's little cylinders that kind of it looks like a gear shaped, the scratches on the outside of it. I'll find those laying, dig them up out of the ground. What the heck is that signal? And I find them just enough that I remember, what the sound is now. But I mean, for a while there, it was like, I don't know, every 100 targets or something, I'd get one of those. And what is that signal, man? I don't recognize that. Is it making a clipping sound, but it's still locking on? And, so yeah, I think it's like graphite or something along those lines.
I know when I was, tennis rackets made out of graphite.
Yeah.
And there was like 3 different types. There was like a powder they made it out of. They usually mixed it with like fiberglass or some other material. And then there was like just the long fibers, and then they actually had one type that they wove. It was like a cloth,
right?
And that was the strongest. And but there's a lot of stuff in sports and different things that are made out of graphite now, that because it's so light, so strong.
Carbon is what you're thinking about, Craig. I mean, we should have just asked Ohio Relic Hunter. The man knows. It seems like he knows a little bit about everything, and it's carbon rods is what we're talking about. It's not graphite. The carbon rods.
Well, that's what it's called.
Essentially, yeah, it's technical, but that's what you're talking about. And that, and it's funny. It'll set off some, like the bliss tool. It set off. Let me know it's there. But like, I think I've gone over them with a White's machine, and I think I've dug a couple of them, but they had to be pretty shallow. I don't know what the makeup is of it. Obviously, it's carbon, but I didn't realize it would. Maybe that's why it's giving me a weird signal. For the life of me, I had a couple pieces of that, and I can't remember where I put it at. I have to find some more to do some testing with it, because it's kind of curious why it would put off, on a single tone machine, it would give off a weird tone. It's almost like a nuance is really strange about it. So with the bliss tool, but with the Whites, it was just like giving me a... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's kind of like a hot rock or something almost.
Yeah. What it seems like to me, anyway. And he said, "Yep, old car batteries." So yeah, that must be what I'm, tractor batteries, car batteries, that kind of thing. But I think, am I right, Bill? Is it probably from the 30s, 20s, and 30s when they use those, or do they use them after that? It just seems like I find them on a lot of sites that have a lot of 1920s stuff. So I didn't know if it was early batteries, or I don't think they're from the 50s or 60s, that's for sure. But it's strange stuff. If you dig it, you'll know it. It's just a weird, it's a real light feeling. It doesn't feel like a iron or lead or anything. It's just pretty light. But
but it's hard,
Yeah, solid.
It's graphite is brittle usually. You can't hit. You can't take like hitting it on the ground or hitting it on a rock or something. Mm-hmm. I've seen people get mad, take a $200 racket, smack it, and break it.
Oh, jeez.
They were playing tennis, but it's got extreme stiffness when you play tennis. It gives you a lot more control, and when they came out with those graphite, it was unbelievable how much better we could play tennis with those kind of rackets.
Yeah,
but that started around 1975, I think, is when they first came out.
Yeah, just listening to the thunder. Yeah, it's funny. You're talking about, they get mad and they throw their racket or smack it on the ground. And I keep on thinking about that guy we saw at one of the hunts, and he got mad and he threw his dais, across the way. And oh my God, don't throw your detector. That's the last thing you want to do. Trying to get them things fixed is a pain. But he didn't. I think he broke the lower shaft on it or something like that. He fell over a wall or something like that, and it broke the lower shaft on the dais, and then he chucked the whole thing. I'm like, oh my God. I've been that mad before, but I've never actually thrown my metal detector. I don't. With my luck, I'd smash the control box on the tree or something, and it would be ruined. So
yeah,
I've thrown the shovel once or twice.
I remember that same hunt. There's this kid that he had I think an H250, and he was out there hunting like crazy. That yard. Everybody was out there in that yard hunting, and this kid couldn't find anything, and so after about 2 hours, he comes running over his father. He goes, "This machine is junk. I need a better machine." And his father had a fit. And I started laughing my head off. I couldn't help it. And the kid was looking at me, and I said, "Look, man, I got a $1,500 machine, and I'm having problems. It's not the machine." I said, "This place is hammered,
Yeah.
I said, But I said, I'm sorry I laughed, but I said,
It strikes me funny when they do that, because I can see us doing that. You just want to throw a damn childish fit when it's not working right for you.
I've seen grown men do that,
Yeah.
I've been on sites and people are digging stuff, and this guy's like, just about losing his mind. He can't get his coil over anything, and he's like, I've seen people, I've been out there hunting, and all of a sudden, I find something. Next thing I know, the guy's jumps right in front of me, and so I had a technique where I would just keep my coil right next to his coil.
Yeah,
I've had that. Hey man, you're interfering with me, and I go, yeah, well, why don't you get out of the way then?
It gets competitive, man. I was at that DIV hunt, man. It was like that. I mean, I was hunting with a couple of guys that were really involved with the DIV, and we were just kind of hunting along. This guy come walking. We were working in the same direction. This other guy, not even 10 feet forward from us, is walking the other direction, across us and digging targets. And we just all stopped at one time and just sitting there looking at him. He's trying to ignore us, and I'm like, really, dude? I mean, we got 500 acres out here, and you got to hunt 10 feet from us? I was like, etiquette.
Yeah.
A little bit of etiquette goes a long way, but I'm just ready to throw a southern fit. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't dug a button all day, and he gets right in front of me, and of course he digs a button, and I was like, just keep your mouth shut, Derek. Bite your tongue, And I always tell people I got to follow what practice what I preach. But I remember when I first started, Craig, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I've been on sites where, it was tough hunting, there was stuff there, but you had to go slow, and it wasn't easy. And it's pretty much like that on a lot of Civil War sites. The stuff's deeper because it's older,
right.
And the bullets are pretty heavy, so they sink into the ground. So, you can't sit there swinging wild. You got to, swing soft. Some of that's, like a cuff button, at 6-7 inches. It's really soft signal, and you're going to miss stuff. And I'd see these guys, and we'd be going out on like a construction site. Everybody would be all around the whole place right at when they getting ready to go home.
Yeah.
And as soon as all of a sudden you see the tractors all moving off the site, and the guys getting in their truck to go home. Man, that place be swarmed, like especially in Centerville, Manassas.
Right.
It's like, God, there would be so many people. I remember Howard and I were hanging around he knew this guy at this pizza place, and they said we could park there in the alley. And so we're standing there, and I didn't really see him. I saw a couple guys waiting around. And as soon as there must have been 100 guys showed up. I don't even know where they parked. But you had to get out there really quick and start hunting,
right.
Because after the first 20 or 30 minutes, it was like everybody's just walking around going over and over the same old places that's already been hit,
Well, I mean, it's kind of like what I follow too, Craig, when I'm, got these big hunts and stuff. And we've tried it both ways where we get right out there and start leading, but you find yourself working too fast. Remember, we were up there in Pennsylvania. I mean, Craig, getting ready to get started, and first thing he said, we're going to walk where nobody else is walking. We walked, I don't know, about 200 or 300 yards, something like that, to that field, and we started working along that field, and it was like nobody out there. And then we got to the bottom, and started working our way back up, and here comes another pack of people, and they all swarmed in there, and like, okay, now we're going to go to the other side where they were at, and started hunting. And we ended up, I found a Tom with that big dandy button. You found a lamp part. You found, we just kind of worked where they were working before.
Remember, I said, they were talking about that little pathway or something was a stagecoach road.
Right.
And there was a stagecoach stop or something along there. So I started thinking, man, that's what we ought to hunt. And so when we went over there, it was all those sticker bushes. The place was all full of sticker bushes along there. And so people hadn't really gotten in there. And we pulled out a few things in there. And that was about the best place we had, that we found stuff. And then there was another place just across on the other side there, near that path, and there's another field that we it was closer to the house.
Yeah.
That's where I got the I think it was a 1798 straight bust, but that thing was down 14 inches, so it was pretty deep.
Well, I was getting that deep stuff down there on the other with that first part that we started hunting. There's a big. I think it used to be a bean field or something at one time, but these fields hadn't really been worked a lot. as far as big, chisel tilled or whatever you want to call it, real deep or anything. So I think there was a lot more finds to be made. It just hadn't been tilled in so long. But down at the bottom, there was 25 or 30 people down there, and they were digging a lot of like 45 caliber rounds and stuff that were, more modern, but they were still hitting it. They were all down there. The next day, I went down there and dug a King George II. I dug a pocket knife. I dug that wheel from a pull behind toy, and I mean all this stuff. They were all right there. It's like, man, how in the world did they miss this stuff? All I could think of is they were being too selective because of those bullets.
Yeah.
They were like, I don't want to dig any more of these. I think I dug 9 or 10 of them myself, but it's like, I'm like, if they're only like 5 inches deep, I mean, I just flip them out of the ground, get them out of the way. That's what I figured.
But they might have been something else,
Well, yeah, you never know, because I went out using I don't look at my meter. I don't have a meter, on the ballistic it's just a sound. And they may have been looking at their meter, and those 45 rounds were reading up, I don't know, at 50 or 60. That could have been buttons or whatever else. I don't know what they read up on an Equinox or what have you. But, yeah, I mean, they may have just assumed that it was trash and walked on it. But, I'm not going to say I dug 9 of them, 9 or 10, but it was, no big deal. They were so shallow, but the stuff I was digging, the good stuff, so to speak, the King George and everything, these were all, 9, 10, 12 inches down, I think it was, on that wheel for that pull-behind toy. It was all real ornate brass wheel. The pocket knife was real neat, too, and I'd never seen one copper or brass on the, handle and everything. The insides were all shot, but the whole outside of the knife was really kind of cool looking. And it, George was telling me that's definitely 1700s, which I didn't even know they had a folding knife like that. But it had like I don't know, pearl handle. I don't know, pearl-shaped handle or something like that, where kind of real ornate. It was real ornate. But yeah, I think it was Mike Miller found the door handle, the porcelain door handle. Remember that? Or it was like a brownish, it looked like wood-tone porcelain or something. He found that up there.
Some of them are rock. They're actually rock.
But we gave it to them. They loved it because they wanted to use it on the restoring the big old house. They said it was probably from that house originally, so they were very happy to get that. I think it was the whole door assembly, the whole handle and the little flat plate-like thing. I don't know how to put it. It kind of fit in there. It was a primitive door latch.
I found a number of those door handles that have the either brown or white, kind of rock.
Yeah. I think they got brass inside of them or something.
I think it's maybe limestone or something. I don't know, but it's kind of neat. They, the reason you get them is they got the piece of brass embedded in it.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I thought it had brass in it or something. It was setting the detector off for some reason. I think they're cool. I find them a lot of places in the early 1900s and 1920s. I found it on a site there, a couple white ones, and they didn't have any other part but it was like broken off right where the metal goes into the porcelain, so that's brass or whatever, or a brass piece. That's what I was finding, but I hadn't found one up north. I didn't realize they made them that early on. But yeah, you find some. You just never know what you're going to dig up, man. Some of these places, I mean, they dug at that same. Yeah, I think we got it. All right, hooking up Skype again, guys. I don't know if it's going to keep this recording going or not. I may have, y'all. I'm not sure. Keep a line. Okay, it says we're live again. Craig, you can try to call in if you want to. Yeah, that was a pretty good strike right there. It takes our power out just a little bit for like a few seconds, and it'll come back on again. But unfortunately, the routers and stuff, it takes a little bit for them to get going back and everything. So I'm assuming that we're up and running. And Nelson's still alive. But Craig, I was hunting out there today, those new settings with the Equinox. And, it can really amazes you how it's your settings, even on the same detector, moving around like that can open up these spots you thought you'd hunted to death and there's nothing there. And he went through there. He was digging some iron and everything is what he was telling me before the show. But yeah, still, I mean, if there wasn't anything there before, it has to be the settings he was using. That's why, when you start turning these things and kind of thinking outside the box with the settings, you could actually, make your detector, kind of like a totally different detector. Especially, that's why we buy aftermarket coils too. It gives you different ammunition, so to speak, with your detector to work out unmasking problems or what have you. So we try to switch things up. If you have the same detector and you can't afford a brand new one, just go out and buy an aftermarket coil, and that can maybe help you. Like with the AT Pro, we talk about the tornado coil versus the stock coil. And, it doesn't read up real good on the screen as far as the numbers go, but it's definitely a better coil, and you're getting deeper items, and you're hunting more by tones with it. But if you use a AT Pro all the time, well, you got the tones in your head anyways. What it sounds like, and how it reacts to iron targets and non-ferrous targets and stuff, and if it has clips or spits or what have you. So now in studio. Oh, there he is. All right, buddy. Hopefully you're there. That was a kind of a close hit right there. It just knocked our power out for just a few seconds. It just takes the routers so long to get back up and running.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to start the show over again. If I hit close on this and reopen it, then I got to come up with a new title and all this other stuff to get the show back going again, versus just leaving it on. So yeah, it was me talking to myself more or less for a while. Going, what the heck? I didn't know whether to keep on with the show and if it would catch on the replay. If people downloaded the show and stuff. So, but I was just kind of talking to them a little bit about the settings you were using on the Mind Lab and how it kind of makes it a totally different detector. For the newbies out there and stuff, you can really adjust it good. Now, are they going to come out with some aftermarket coils for that? Because that's what I'd really be interested in seeing. With that machine, what an aftermarket coil will do for it.
I haven't seen anything on that in months. Actually, about 6 or 8 months. I saw that somebody was asking about it, and they were saying that Mind Lab would have to license the people to do it or something, or authorize it to be done or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they should do that. Get a contract with Nell or something.
I didn't know you had to get permission to do that. And an aftermarket product like that. Do you have to do that for
I wouldn't think so.
Cover or something.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's just I wouldn't think so, because it's something you're making. I mean, Dennis. Well, he's passed on now, but Dennis Didio had made that thing for the Deus. That works on a Deus. Yeah, if you're going to work underwater with it or keep the coil underwater, you couldn't get a good signal from it to the headphones, so he came up with that little thing you put on there, like an antenna almost. Because all the electronics for it really are in the coil on a Deus. So, if you held it underwater, you couldn't get a good signal, but you could, so he made this little part for it and everything. I don't think he ever had to talk to Deus, but I don't know how the laws run. I mean, the way I look at it is, we make stuff all the time to make things better for us, and if we sell it to our friends and stuff, I don't see a problem with that. But I mean, it just depends probably how they market it, Craig. I mean, and Nell's been making coils for a lot of different metal detectors for a long time.
Well, I know, like with the Garretts, they got all these aftermarket coils for the AT Pros and Maxes and stuff. And usually they, after about 6 months, you start seeing these things show up on the market. It's not right away. I mean,
right. But, it's been about a year now, hasn't it? Or a year and a half, hasn't it, with the Equinox?
I don't know. It's been probably close to a year.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Not really sure, but I waited about a good 6 months before I just wanted to see what the hype was, whether it was hype or not, and I started seeing, mostly about 90% of the reviews were good. But I'll tell you a funny one. I had the Telenox. I think I had it on Instagram. I was showing the thing collapsed. Maybe it's Facebook. I don't know. But somebody said, "Hey, did they make that shaft for any good machines?" I just put laugh out loud.
Gavin. Good.
There was another guy that was from Morocco, and he said, he goes, "Question, could you send me that Telenox shaft. I want one before I pay you. And I just wrote laugh out loud.
Yeah, I like that one.
And then the guy answered me back and said, "Forget it." I was like,
yeah, that was crazy. I'm like, yeah, Craig, you send me an Equinox. I'll pay you I'll pay you on the second Tuesday of next week. It's kind of like Popeye and whatever. The hamburger thing. I'll pay you on. I'll gladly pay you for next Tuesday for a hamburger today or whatever.
Yeah, that was Wimpy, I think.
Wimpy. God. Yeah, anytime somebody wants to send me, I'll pay you tomorrow. Yeah, right. Okay. Hey, the guy asked. He was honest. What the hell? So.
You should have been eating spinach instead.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I guess what Gavin was saying on here, the multiple. I'm assuming multi-frequency would make it a challenge for a coil manufacturer. I don't know really if it. Well, as long as the coil was tuned, Craig. I don't know how that works. I've never tried to make a coil. I've seen it done. Ahmed, has people making the coils for the bliss tool by hand. Well, they have a winder to wind the stuff inside the coil. The coil windings. But it's by hand. It's not an automated thing. And then they set them in a mold, like it's the epoxy mold. That's what the outside of the coil is, like epoxy resin, versus polymers that they use on most coils now. It makes it really durable and stuff, but they would pretty much hand make them, and they could tune them to the precise frequency or within reason as far as the coil cables go. That was, a lot of the length and stuff I think has to do with it. That's why we never had an
extension. That's the only way you can get like the 98 or 100% compatibility.
Right. There's a technical part of it. Yeah.
A lot of the stock coils you get are 70 or 80%. That's why, like Nell and some of those other coils, they do the same thing. Probably, they get the most performance out of the coil.
Right.
But I'm wondering if MindLab has done that with this coil. I haven't really heard anything about that part of it.
Yeah, I haven't either, and they may be coming out with something themselves. That's why I just don't know how. I mean, obviously, if you trademarked it, you can't call it I don't know. Like you have SEF coils, the SEF coils and Nell coils, and these are all aftermarket. They just make them so they'll work with the frequency of the detector, that particular detector. So I don't know all the legalities. I mean, that part of the hobby kind of gets crazy too. That can be vindictive, vicious. And, so you start, people think that you took their idea or whatever. And, oh, my gosh, it can be a big, big hassle for everyone. So I don't know. Maybe there is some kind of rule on that or something. I just never got into it to know it.
MindLab patents everything.
Well, yeah. And they should.
They're part of this, mining consortium that's huge. And so that they got, so much money. They're not like a regular metal detecting company that's, not really, rich or anything. It's kind of hard to, the market's smaller with MindLab is, they're number one. I mean, they've definitely taken back number one. And the thing about those frequency coils, the CTX, I think, doesn't it run on different frequencies?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, the way it does it. I don't know.
Yeah. The Explorer did. I had the Explorer back in the early 2000s.
I couldn't run White's coils like that. Right. I mean, I couldn't run I tried to run a DF. I had a MXT coil. I tried to run it on I can't remember if I was trying to run it on the White Spectra V3. And it didn't work. It worked for a minute. It was like, oh my God, we're getting a quarter, 2 foot away. An air test, and Tony and I, went out to hunt with it and said, man, I don't think this thing is working, and we couldn't even get it to do anything. It wasn't giving a signal off anything. So it was totally different frequencies. The V3 Whites was a multiple frequency. You could run at the same time. I think it was 3 frequencies, 7 or 2.5 12.5 and 20.5. I can't remember. It's been a while, but the MXT I think was running. Was it 15, Craig, kilohertz or meg? Well, I don't know. I'm talking. I just can't remember anymore. My brain is shot. But I have to look back at my notes, right?
Well, there's a couple MXTs. Maybe they run at different frequencies.
They have them MX. I don't think they've changed that, but yeah, the coil definitely matters. You can't interchange coils for models of machines very often, as far as I know, anyway. I've never had much luck with it. If you have one that's made for that particular, so there is definitely a frequency thing involved with that, the making of the coil.
Yeah,
so to speak.
That's part of the tuning the coil to the machine.
Yep.
I took a 8-inch a coil for a Bandito, or 9-inch coil for a Bandito, and put it on a Toltec 100, which the Bandito I think was maybe 10 or 11 kilohertz, and then I think the Toltec was like 14 kilohertz, and it worked. There was a slight bit of noise, but not bad.
Mm-hmm.
But the meter was skewed completely. It was like all the numbers were like 10 numbers lower on the meter.
Yeah. Well, we did. I did work on the bliss tool. The insides of it. I had one. The guy literally caught the machine on fire somehow inside. I can't even remember what he did. I think he plugged it into a different charger. There wasn't even a bliss tool charger. It was some other kind of appliance or something. Somehow got it to plug in. I don't know how in the hell he did it, but he did. But it fried literally. They have two main lines off the battery, a positive and a negative, obviously, and they're pretty thick, Greg. I mean, it's like antenna wire almost. I mean, it's real thick stuff like you use for a kicker for a CB radio. The gauge was pretty thick, and it melted through both of those wires. It melted the wires coming off that plug into the other part of the machine, and it fried the coil, the insulation off the wires that connected the coil to the board. And it was a nightmare. I mean, the guy sent him, could you do anything with this? And I'm like, oh my God, this thing is, I don't even know where to start at. And I actually took it back to Bulgaria with me when I went over there and had a meds guys look at it, tech there. And, Craig, it was amazing. He's like flipping the board, looking at the board, takes this off, takes that off, solders this on and everything. And, meds telling me, don't do this at home. Don't mess with the machine like this. This is very technical. And it was interesting watching him, even with the coil, where we have like how a coil looks when you plug it into the back of your machine or whatever, that piece where and I can't get into too much trade stuff with it, but as far as what they do, but there's like, we'll say 6 wires. They are all 3 millimeters long, and you have to pretty much, cut the insulation off the wire because you have to have something to solder with, and you got to make these little solders, and they all sit within about a millimeter of each other apart. And, for a guy like me, I have, I always say I got gorilla fingers. Those are really hard solders. These guys made it look like it was just like they've been doing it all their lives. Well, they probably have been, electronic wise.
Yeah.
And Med picks it up and he's holding his finger on the back of the board with a little diode thing, and he's looking on this side, and he's got a solder gun, and he's got a piece of solder, a wire, like somehow bent around there, and he's doing these solders on this board like in record time. And it would take me an hour to get one of those solders right because it's such a small area, and they're using these specific solder guns or whatever you want. I don't know the technical term of them, but they're really small points on them because you have to be able to get onto that board and put that stuff in without interfering with other stuff, putting jumper lines in. And I mean, I think when 15 minutes they had this thing up and running. Okay, it's good to go. You can give it back. He goes, you Americans are too hard on stuff. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I get those things from U.S. all the time. Broken this and broken that. How do you break this? How do you break that? I said, Med, you'd be surprised. We're tough on stuff. We're tough in America. We want stuff to be, strong and, not break. He goes, but he blew it up. Or how do you, he said, is it like a meltdown? It melted down. I said, I know. I had one guy call me and he literally sent me the box, Kirk. It was funny. Well, it wasn't funny when it happened to him, and I felt bad about it. He bought a bliss tool from a guy used, and it was in the same town, so he went to pick it up, and they got to talking, and he was putting everything back into his trunk on his car, and he forgot to pick up the detector. It was still in the box that he bought from the guy, and he pulled out of the driveway and backed over top of it. And he thought it was the guy's dog, so he automatically freaked out. But he gets this thing, and he says, "Can I send this to you? Can you do anything with this?" And I said, "Well, just send it to me, man. I don't know what to tell you." I said, "I'll do what I can." And it was DOA. I mean, it was in 3 pieces, Craig. The control box was. I'm like, holy cow! And I still got it out there. I mean, it's just I use it for parts. That's all it's good for is parts.
It's surprising how many people lean the machine up against their car, and then they move and then they back up or something and right over top of it, or they put it in the back, right up against the bumper.
Yep.
And they forget about it.
I think we've all done it one time or another, almost done it anyways. I do it.
Howard had that happen, and it went right over the shaft and didn't hit, the control box of the coil.
Right.
But, of course, we're out in the middle of nowhere and they can't hunt.
So. Oh, this machine was crushed, man. He of all the places to hit, but it was in the box, in a cardboard box or whatever. I mean, he could have run over if he'd run over the coil, we would have been fine. If he ran over the shafts, he would have been fine. But he had to run right over the corner of that control box and just split everything. It was still together. I mean, it was just a mess in there. It crushed the part of the board, so it was pretty much DOA anyways. But he said just keep it for parts. I said, yeah, I mean, I could still use the control knobs and stuff if I need to in a pinch or whatever. And that's another thing too. These, I can't go into a lot of detail about it. But it's pretty, for me, it's a very challenging detector to work on electronically because I call them micro solders because they're so small. I mean, to a regular electronics guy that's been doing it for 20 years, it's probably nothing. But, putting these control knobs and stuff on there and soldering them to the board, and the way the V3s used to be, if they have safeties built into them to protect the board from the high voltage, like if something goes wrong with the battery and it does something, or you have it up to a charger and you get a power surge, it's supposed to protect the control board itself. So they have these jumpers. You literally had to solder in these jumpers onto the board in certain spots, which is not uncommon for electronics anyways, the guys that do it. But for me, as a layman, not really having ever messed with these machines, it took me a long time. I had to practice like crazy, Craig. When I was over there, I probably spent 10 to 15 hours for the days I was there just trying to absorb all this information on how to set the oscilloscopes up and the multimeters. I mean, all these... It's so technical. I mean, I'm sure these Equinoxes are the same and everything. To get the stuff right, you need to run all this stuff. But what to look for, I mean, if you're not into it for a long time, you haven't been doing it all your life.
The difference is, though, with like the Equinox and maybe the Deus is, it's more like a cell phone with a chip inside.
Yeah.
All these transistors and diodes and stuff.
There's like 3 or 4 chips in a bliss tool, but it's not it's not a programming thing. It's more of a physical fixing them. I don't know what it would take to fix an Equinox if you blew a diode. I don't even know how big the control board is. I've never looked inside her to see them, but I'm sure it's pretty technical. They're using all this new stuff, to get this, linking in. You can update these machines online and, firmware updates and all that stuff. I don't even know that's a whole new realm for me too. So.
Well, it's like the Equinox has all kinds of software trying to figure out if it targets, a coin or not usually. And it's like I was telling Derek, I lowered the machine down into the iron range because if there's something next to a coin that's kind of blocking a signal a little bit, it'll reject that as not a coin. And
right.
If you run it wide open, it will. You may dig some round pieces of iron, or slightly round-looking pieces of iron every once in a while. Like I dug one today. It was like kind of like off maybe a can or something, iron can, way long time ago, and it made like a 5 or 6 bump in the ground. But when I got it out of the ground, it make anything at all. But what the machine is trying to analyze, to keep you from digging iron if you run it at zero. But if you run it down lower, you'll dig a little bit more iron, but you'll dig those coins and stuff that normally the machine would ignore. I started realizing it's rejecting these weird signals, so if you open it all the way up, it's amazing how much stuff I pulled out of the yard after 2 years, and using the Bliss tool the same way, opening it up. And, it's like every time I go out, I dig at least one thing. And I've gotten so where I just save it, as soon as I dig something good, then I just turn the machine off and wait for another day.
Yeah.
But, just give me something to do.
Right.
But it's kind of fun because I'm learning this machine, and it's like the meter was jumping all over the place, but the tone was just a dig me tone. I was thinking it could have been a coin, it even sounded like maybe it could have been like an Indian head or something. Mm. But, the tone just was, really good. And I thought, I didn't even have to look at the meter, but it kept jumping up for some reason to like 31 or 32. And then it would, when I got it out of the ground, it read 16. Mm-hmm. But, when I pinpointed it, it read 17 on the meter. So usually that's a signal for a bullet, a 58 caliber bullet.
Yeah, I'm going through. I got a lot of guys putting up stuff on chat. Let's see. Brandon says, I'm using a White's MXT Pro with White's 6x9 elliptical coil. I usually hunt in coin and jewelry mode. I've been taking your advice and really, it's really playing with the settings. Any suggestions? And it's been a while for me, Brandon, with an MXT. It's been probably, Craig, 9 years now, 8 years. The biggest thing with the MXT is don't go crazy on the gain. That really goes along the lines of with the Spectra V3, same way. I think I could go up to an 8 RX gain. Sometimes, a lot of times, I would hunt in 5. Anything you can turn down that really doesn't affect the actual detection, like backlights, sounds, and I can't remember what the MXT did. I should remember, but I'm having one of these months where I just can't remember a lot of stuff. But at any rate, turning down a lot of this stuff that you don't use, that you don't need to use while you're metal detecting, it's more of I guess just a bells and whistles. I always try to turn a lot of that stuff down or off. If you're not going to be looking at the screen so much, why do you need a backlight on? It saves your battery a lot of times. And with the White's machines, most machines will do it too. But as the batteries lose voltage, they'll start getting chatty and falsing, and it's nothing more than just changing the batteries. Once they get down to around 9.5 volts to 9 volts, right in that area, it starts getting unruly, and you just change the battery, and you're back up to 11.5 volts or something. I don't know if it has that reading on these new MXT Pros. I think the only difference with the Pro, Craig, wasn't it the coil? They used that D2 or that Spider coil. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think so.
MXT 300 or something like that. I don't know. I don't think there's a whole lot. I'm sure they've made some upgrades inside the machine, maybe modernized it a little bit, but the MXT, I don't think it's made major stuff in the last 5 or 6 years anyways that I can recall. That's the kind of stuff I would do that. Now, you're using the 6x9. I think that's the white coil, the elliptical coil. That's the one I really liked as far as their stock coils go. Excuse me. I'd use that one. I like the D2 coil, but I just had better luck out of the 6x9 oval coil. The 5.3 is kind of nice. I believe they make one for the MXT. It's a concentric coil, and it's a 5.3 inch, I guess, round coil. I've had pretty good luck with that in high trash areas. You got a lot of junk around there, really able to work through there. I started going to the aftermarket coils with the Whites, the SEFs. The one I found that I really kind of liked better than all of them was the it was a 6x8 butterfly coil that SEF makes. I'm sure they still make them. That really worked on the same premise as the 6x9 that you had from the factory. It seemed to work better. It seemed to really unmask targets easier. It was just, you could tell the difference between the two. Not that one was better than the other so much. It was they were different they're almost the same size, but they just did it differently. It seemed like you could unmask targets a little bit easier with that accelerator coil, the SEF coil. I did have I wouldn't waste your money on the 15x18. I bought one for it's a huge coil. It's a huge butterfly coil by SEF or accelerator coil. I never noticed a big difference as far as finding stuff with that coil. Maybe some people have. I don't know. I found more stuff with the smaller coils than I did with the great big loop coil. And it hurts your arm so bad, swinging that thing. You imagine swinging that for 8 or 9 hours a day. So I really wouldn't waste your money on that one unless you have something big you're looking for that's deep. I mean, that's, Craig, I don't know if you think the same way I do about it. And most of these detectors, bigger coils, really don't make that much of a difference. Now, with the Bliss tool, the 15-inch coil, I love that coil on the beach, and it's precise. It doesn't act like these other ones do because I can put a 22 round an inch down in the ground. It'll pick it up just like it would, with any other coil, the 11-inch coil or the 7x9. I just never noticed that versatility with the whites, with that SEF coil on the whites. I didn't notice a big difference per the beating the hell out of your arm trying to swing that thing all day. You got to weigh the options there. On the beach.
I used to.
Go ahead, Craig.
I used to see a guy that dug a lot of stuff, and I still see him on Facebook and stuff. But he's used MXT, and he was using one back early 2000s, and I had a Nautilus, and he used to run it in all metal indiscriminate, and pumped the whole machine up, and he never looked at the meter. He just, anything that came back in both tones, he'd dig, and
right.
That's the way he did it. But I remember he called me over one time to check a signal, and I had the Nautilus, and he said, "What do you think that signal is?" And I said, "Sounds like a dandy button at maybe 5 or 6 inches to me." And so he dug the signal, and it was a large cent at 10 inches. And he said he was having trouble hearing it. So I don't know. The site was a little bit clayish, but
right.
That's how he hunted. He would run it in both all metal and discriminate at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way the Nautilus was too. I had all metal, and let's see, it was all metal in my left ear and discriminate in my right ear. But it's kind of weird at first, listening to that. Some people would turn the all metal off, just listen to discriminate.
I would say too, Craig. I mean, going along with Brandon, he was asking about the settings and stuff. I mean, I try to run the least amount of discrimination as I can. I don't want to dig nails, obviously. I would set it. I mean, so maybe if you can get the nail to start spitting at 5 inches deep or something like that, and I would, it would be a little bit more noisy, but by backing down the discrimination, obviously you're gaining a little bit more depth. Anything you do with the whites or any other brand, the more restrictions you put on your machine as far as discrimination and lowering the power, you got to be careful. There's a fine line where you get to the point where you're just losing too much depth. And even on the Bliss tool, it's like that, but it's not to the same extreme because it's so powerful to begin with. So it's kind of offsetting it a little bit. Setting up your threshold is another thing. I mean, some people like to have that hum in their ear. I try to hunt that machine as quiet as I can. Well, most machines, I like them to be a silent hunter. with the whites that you can't. Well, you can do that. It's just not. I think you need to hear a little bit of that hum in the background, but keeping your discrimination levels. And I'm trying to remember what I used to run mine. It's just been many years. I'd have to put one in my hand.
Can you run
the time? But
can you run the MXT and discriminate down in the iron range?
Oh yeah. I believe so. I know you can with the Spectre V3. You can actually run everything from negative 95 to positive 95. And for those of you who don't know, there's a whole range from, if you start at 0 and you go back, it's obviously negatives numbers. That's mostly all of your irons, all the way back to negative 95. And then on the positive side of 0, it goes all the way up in 19 on a whites, 19 is a nickel, and I think 78 is a penny, 80, when you start getting into the 80, 78, 79 penny and dime, and then when you get into the 80s, I think 86 was a quarter. But you had to be careful because bottle caps would read up as a quarter. You eventually figured out as you spent time with the machine, which ones were bottle caps and which ones were quarters. But I dug them anyways because they're so close. It's kind of like nickels and pull tabs. I think a square tab would come up as 21 on a white's MXT or DFX or whatever, and nickels came in at 19. And so they're really close as far as VDI numbers. You just don't want, if you're digging so many pull tabs, I can see, like if you're in a park and you dug 25 or 30 of them and not got a nickel yet, I can almost see notching out some of the aluminum. But it's a two-edged sword, man. You're going to miss nickels, you're going to miss gold, and other stuff too. If you go too high on the discrimination, like buttons, buttons a lot of times come in at 40s and 50s, if I remember right. So, I try to keep all my positive numbers, as far as a Spectre V3 up there. Even engagement, like an engagement ring can come up as a 12 or 13 VDI number. And I used to be a slave to that. I got to the point where I stopped looking at that stupid screen all the time. It just, even back then, it was getting annoying because I thought to myself, this sounds good. Why is it reading up as this? And I started digging targets and started finding out, hey, it's saying it's a button, or whatever. I knew better, than to do that.
Yeah.
I just kind of walk on it, and I'm missing so many good targets. So I started hunting by sound and not worrying about it. And what I did, instead of leaving like the white Spectre V3, instead of putting the discrimination up, if there is a way, and I don't know what the new MXTs are like, if you can just turn the sound off on the negative numbers, the iron numbers, that would be better than anything. Because you're not limiting the machine as far as putting the actual discriminator up. You're just turning the sound off on them. And you could do that with the Spectre V3. I don't know if you could do it with the MXT now since they've redone it. That'd be cool if you could. Because then, you're essentially running an all metal in a way.
Yeah.
It's accepting. So
one of the things to increase your fines is just disregard the meter.
Yeah, well, yeah. That thing will make you nuts, man. Some of the guys live by it.
The deeper the target is, the less accurate the meter is, to the point where it's almost useless, at the extreme depths.
Yeah, I use it as an example on that machine. The whites machine, I could bury a quarter at 12 inches down, and the machine itself can get the quarter. You can hear it. It's making a signal on it with the D2 coil, no problem. But if you look at your screen, it's saying negative 93, negative 94. And that's iron. That's what first thing goes through your mind. So you would walk on that, or if you had it discriminated out all the way or sound turned off, you would literally walk right by that, not even hear it. So, these meters are only good to a certain depth. Most of the time on the earlier machines, it's probably Craig, 5 inches, 6 inches on a dime. And, if you can get, and then the depth reading.
With a standard,
same way.
Yeah, with a standard coil.
Yeah.
Back then, when you got the bigger coils, they weren't as good as the big coils are now. They weren't tuned, it's good.
It's just technology has jumped that much. You kind of deal with old school and new school, machine wise. It doesn't mean they're junk or they don't work. It just, you have to understand what you're working with. If you're using a MXT or if you're using an E-Track or you're using AT Pro or whatever from that time period, I don't know what they've done. I'm sure they make improvements on these machines as you buy them new now, as circuits are getting cheaper and different ways they can work with them. And that's probably why they came up with like AT Max and everything else, because it incorporates some of this stuff in. But as far as performance-wise, you're not gaining much. The actual, like an AT Pro versus an AT Gold or Max.
The trouble with depth is you got the inverse square ratio, and
right.
The more power you put in the ground, you have to keep putting, you have to set up a certain way and you're getting a certain amount of depth. In order to, double that depth or whatever, you got to put about 6 or 8 times more power into it to get, that kind of depth. Usually you got to put 10 or 20% in just to get another inch or so. So
crazy,
you get to the point where you're putting so much power in the ground, it's just feedbacking, and just noise, and you won't even hear a shallow target sometimes if you use it, too much that way. So, people have tried to get the most out of their machines and everything, but we've hit like there's like laws of physics or electronics that keep you from going. This inverse square ratio is one of them. You can only put so much power, and more power you put, you got to keep doubling it to get that little bit extra more depth.
Right.
So, that's why the pulse machines, that they don't work the same way. So that they get a much deeper signal on the pulse, but the VLF is not the same way.
That's put well, Craig. It's kind of hard to explain this stuff electronically, for me, anyways, because it's something that I know what to do setting wise. If I had an MXT detector in my hand, and I could sit there and show Brandon, okay, Brandon, you want to push this and this, and this is what we're looking for. I'm better at pretty much hands-on type thing, showing people, instructing them or whatever. That's why I was doing the videos so much, as far as, doing fair rate ground balances or how to ground balance your machine or how to do this or that. It's easier for me to do it in a video rather than explain it, because we get into these topics on this show, and like we're talking about nuances of sound and tone. I mean, how do you explain that? How do you explain a sound on the radio? I mean, it's really difficult. So we come up with a whole new language about clicking and popping and elongated sounds and everything. And I guess settings are kind of when you're dealing with so many metal detectors, you have to remember which metal detector it was, because you set up a whites. Essentially, you're ground balancing it and everything the same way you would a Mind Lab or a Thesauro or whatever. But the adjustments themselves, I don't want to give you the wrong, I guess, actual settings, for lack of me remembering what they were. I more or less would tell you that as far as discrimination, keep it as low as you can. You don't want to knock out too much stuff. You don't want to put those restrictions on your detector. You don't want to run your gain too high, because they have they had a button on a white Spectra where you can hit it and it would tell you recommended RX gain. And you don't necessarily have to go by that. I found that you could lower it down a little bit. If it says 8, as far as your recommended level, I would put mine on 5 or 6, because I feel like, I'm pushing, I don't want to push too hard. Sensitivity is where it's at, not so much the gain. Threshold the same way.
I was just thinking of another trick, negative ground balancing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you do that on a MXT?
I never tried it back then. I never really was. I did it with the Beach Hunter.
Does it have I have an MXT, but I gave it to my brother. I only used it a couple times, mostly just testing it. But does it have like a numbers that you can change the ground balance, or does it just up and down?
I think it's just basic up and down. I'm trying to remember, Craig. It's been so long ago. And back then, I was like a lot of other people. I stayed in presets a lot. I mean, I didn't really start stepping outside the box probably until I got the Spectra V3. I've gone back to MXC, but I've never had much of a problem with it as far as the presets go.
I heard about this negative ground balancing 30 years ago, and since then I really haven't heard much about it, except I've seen it. They do it on the dais. They started doing it. It's digital on there, but they just drop it down. They get it rated ground balance, and then they can drop it like 4 to 6 numbers down lower, and it'll definitely boost. It's like super tuning.
Right.
But with the Toltec, you couldn't run it in all metal. When you super tuned it, you couldn't. You put the threshold all the way up, and you couldn't pinpoint. You had to pinpoint and discriminate. But
well,
it would definitely. I'd get a silver dime at 6.5 inches instead of 5.5 inches.
Yeah, you can do it. Okay, the way it was explained to me by Ahmed, I mean, I go to, because this guy is freaking genius when it comes to electronics and metal detectors and how they work. And I mean, he just knows his stuff so well. I always said, he's not much of a businessman as far as a marketing person, but as far as electronics go, the guy's a genius. And he always told me, he goes, Derek, if you are totally perfectly ground balanced, totally perfectly, you're already losing depth. That's what he explained it to me. So if you're totally, on spot. Now, what I have found with the Bliss tool, because I started working with this, I found if you go to the positive side, and I think I did a couple of videos with this, it shows great depth when you move to the positive side, or depending on your ground, to go to the negative side. Because really, I can run no ground balance whatsoever on a Bliss tool on a wet salt sand beach and dig quarters 14 inches down in the wet salt sand. So it does have its applications going to the negative side, and they will work. But
you can't do it. You can't do it in bad ground, though. You can only do it in the good ground.
Yeah, well,
or modern ground.
You can actually take a hot rock and ground balance to the hot rock. Well, with the Bliss tool, I think with the Cesaro or any other machine, it may not do it. It's something you got to try. But I can ground balance to that mineralized rock, a hot rock, and it will ignore those. But I can still get dime-sized targets or whatever underneath hot rocks. It'll go right through it. So you're actually using ground balance to effectively make your detector more powerful. It depends on the detector you're using, the model you're using. I'm sure there's limitations to it, but I mean, it definitely can improve your depth greatly. By 2 or 3 inches in, as far as the detector, it's great depth. It's a big change. Yeah. But you also could screw yourself too by not doing it right. And it's something you have to have a test garden for. That's another good reason to have at least a few targets buried so you know what you're getting. Before you take this out to hunt with it in real life, you don't want to miss targets. You want to make sure you're thinking the right way and have it set up the right way.
Another thing is the recovery speed. And
yes.
It doesn't matter if you like on the Deus or the Bliss, not the Bliss, but the Equinox, you can change the recovery speed, but
yep.
You can also move the machine a lot slower, and
right.
cover the ground.
Well, you need to. Yeah.
The funny thing is, I've hunted with a bunch of guys, all over, off and on, and it's like we'll start in this one area, and I'll start hunting, and then I'll kind of look up after half an hour, and most of the guys are way away from me. They're not, I haven't moved that far. I hunt slow, and these guys would be, they would be all over the place. And then if they would see me digging, they'd come back, and if I had some good stuff, all of a sudden they'd be circling me like vultures, Mm-hmm. But, it's touchy telling people, people would say, God, you find all this stuff and I can't find anything. And I go, got the same machine. You're going too slow. I mean, you're going too fast. Oh, don't tell me how to hunt. And I go, fine. Go ahead and why don't you hunt faster? I'll hunt right behind you.
Yeah. Well, it's like, Brandon says it on here. He has 5 years experience, so I'm still a rookie. Hell, we're all still rookies. Have you ever stopped learning stuff about metal detecting? If you think you've already learned everything there is, you might as well just stop detecting. That's the way I look at it. It's like, when I drove truck and everything, and guys, I've been doing it forever and I know what I'm doing. You're going to get somebody killed then, because you're taking it for granted. That's the same aspect I take in everything I do. I'm always learning. And even with 5 years, Brandon, you probably know a lot more than a lot of the other guys that have 5 years because you hunt more. Or you're actually, listening to other shows, you're picking up information and you're using it. So you're increasing your experience level, whether you realize it or not. Because I used to hang out when I first started detecting. Man, I was lucky enough to have a friend that had, at the time he had 30 years, 35 years in, metal detecting, and I watched and learned everything. Whether we were hunting together, I was watching the way he was swinging it, the way he was setting up his detector, how he clean finds, the whole 9 yards. And in a short amount of time, I picked up a lot of information. It helped me to be a better hunter. So I never go by, if somebody tells me I have that a year or two, I mean, you're experienced. If you've been out there once or twice a week for 2 years, you probably have more than the weekend warrior, so to speak. And a lot of us, early on, I mean, it's hard to get out detecting. I mean, I feel privileged every time I can go out there and swing a coil around because life is crazy. So you might only get out, in the summertime, I might get out once every, 2 weeks sometimes, even though the weather's good and everything. I just, time-wise can't do it. But in the process of that, or in the meantime, I'm always on the internet searching up stuff, looking at products, everything else, and reading a lot of what other guys are finding and what settings they're using. So it's kind of keeping me up to date on other detectors that I haven't owned yet. Greg's owned 50 some odd detectors, so he can kind of tell you. So
look at all the information we got now with the internet that I didn't
huge,
have.
Yeah.
We had treasure magazines and meeting guys in the woods that were, veterans, that had been hunting for 20 or 30 years and, talking to them. That's one thing I used to do all the time. And everybody used to go, man, you were sitting there for an hour talking to this guy and we're all hunting. And, I didn't tell them, but, I was picking their brains.
Heck yeah. Yeah.
And, a lot of times, I'd ask them, hey, you got any spots that you don't hunt anymore that you tell me about? And sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. But I'd go back to the spots they'd tell me, and man, I found stuff, it was, I don't think it was ever a spot that I went that, it had been hunted, and people said, oh, it's hunted to death, and, I always found stuff, but you got to hunt hard.
Yeah. Brandon says it on here, sometimes it's a matter of looking at the trash that's on the top of the ground, adjusting discrimination to knock out some of the rubbish out. What's on top of the ground will always be underneath. Gavin's saying that. Gavin's saying it. Yeah. And you're right in a lot of aspects, but you got to get the trash off the top of the ground because it's masking. I mean, I don't know a detector yet that can go through an aluminum can to get a target underneath it. And when you think about surface area, a flattened, you lay a can down and smash it, and it gets an inch down in the ground, and it covers a lot of area. And if it's a really busy site or a lot of stuff on that site, yeah, I mean, you got to get it out of the way anyways. And you're trying to discriminate on an aluminum can. There's not very many detectors that can do it anyways. But it can be the same as iron. I've dug 3-pound motors or 4-pound motors out of the ground, and I've dug, Craig, 38-pound D shackles, stuff that size is masking up a wide area, or could be around that target. I mean, you can axe heads and stuff. There's not a lot of the older detectors that can discriminate out or get a target right next to an axe head. I mean, some of the more recent detectors can, probably in the last, 5-6 years. But masking is a huge problem when you're dealing with, especially with house sites and stuff and parks, and trying to unmask this stuff and get in there. And it's kind of it's a game you're going to play with discrimination and power and, the kind of coils you're using. A lot of the coils on these machines nowadays are all double D coils. It's kind of like a knife blade, the length of whatever. If you have a 10-inch coil, you're taking a 10-inch knife swath across the front of you and as you're swinging the coil. If you're using a concentric coil, it goes into a cone shape into the ground. So you got to overlap by more. You're going to miss targets, but it can get in between stuff a lot better.
Another thing to do is if you get kind of a weird signal or something, check it in a different direction.
Yes.
You probably should check signals in both directions anyway. And I noticed on the Mine Lab Equinox, it's sort of like the Bliss tool that you'll get like, sort of a good signal in one direction, and then you go the other way, and it just clips. The machine just knocks it out because there's some iron next to something, in there. So, machines, iron is the hardest thing for the machines to, discriminate out.
Yeah, it's the worst. It's really bad, especially. Oh, good.
Especially deep, really deep stuff that's iron.
Right.
It'll read on the meters a lot of times. But it's you just never know what you're going to find. I mean, I've dug a lot of horseshoes over the years, but it seems like nowadays I don't dig them very often because I know it's an iron signal.
Well, that's the next thing I was going to get into, Craig, as far as you get these marginal targets. Used to be a key word I use when I was using a White's Spectre V3. Well, those marginal targets, that that target that it could be something. It has some kind of good part in there, tone-wise, even though it's breaking up and spinning, and you would dig it up and it was a 50-50 shot. You might get a dime or a penny, or it was a piece of junk or a bottle cap. It was a crapshoot. And the one thing I've gotten spoiled on is I think the Equinox is the same thing, Craig, and I know the Quest Pro does, and the Bliss Tool. There's hardly any idea about a marginal target anymore, because if it locks on at all, you're using these multiple, if you're getting a high tweak in there, it seems like a lot more often it is a good signal. You know what I mean? A good target in the ground. I know with the Bliss Tool, I can tell you iron in a freaking heartbeat. I know if it sounds great in one direction, I switch directions. If I'm hunting east and west on it, I'll turn and hit north and south and swing that coil over it. It'll break up every time, or it'll spit, or it's a dead giveaway. And I've gotten so used to the detector that's junk. And I actually still, even at this Tollbridge property, I haven't been finding a lot. So I've been digging these targets and say, okay, this sounds like junk. I'm going to dig it anyways. And I dig it up. Sure enough, it's a nail. Sure enough, it's a piece of an iron bolt or whatever, a piece of logging chain. But I want to make sure that I'm hearing it right. You know what I mean, Craig? But some of the other detectors you couldn't do that with. I mean, you had marginal targets, so it's still a term that kind of plays in there. But like with the Deus or the Equinox or the Quest Pro, Bliss Tool, and probably several others, you have that high tone, or that part of that signal, I should say, that is always going to be right. It's good if it's telling you there's a piece of non-ferrous in the ground. There is a piece of non-ferrous in the ground versus a nail. It's what it seems like to me. You kind of did it the other day, Craig, with that lead piece. You said you kept on getting that. Had that good tweak in there. So we're getting away from the marginal, the comment of marginal targets, but it still applies to a lot of the machines. I would say 5 or 6 years old and older. And I'm not sure. I can't remember about the AT Pro. AT Pro, I liked the machine. I had one. I had one with the tornado coil and everything, and it jumps. I just never. I got away from meters, anyways. But I did look at the meter when I was doing the comparison testing, and looking at it is jumping anything that jumped from 20 to 60 on the meter jumping around. I really didn't worry about it so much. I marked it, but what I found is if it was jumping from 45 and up, it was more apt to be a non-ferrous good target, so to speak. And you got to kind of, the only way you're going to learn that is with your machine that you're using, what its quirks are, what its, whether you can even pay attention to the VDI numbers, or the other thing is depth too. A lot of them have pinpointers to tell you the depth. And most of the detectors, that's an estimation, and it's not a very good one on the older ones. But the new machines seem to be a lot more accurate because the technology's getting better. Quest, I know if it says it's 7 inches down, it's 7 inches down. But like the MX Sport, when I saw that being used, and I was with I think it was JD Witchcraft when he won that machine. The first thing I noticed with that machine is that the depth reading pretty much sucked. But you don't really use it. So I mean, does it really matter? I mean, it's one thing that's maybe you don't like about the machine. But I mean, as far as me and Craig go, we've always done the lift your coil off the ground thing. I'm going to dig it anyways. I mean, if you lose it after 5 inches above the ground, it's probably a coin-sized target about 6 inches down. And if still getting it above your knee, it's a big chunk of something.
Yeah, I never worried about how deep it was. I just used the
right,
all metal to pinpoint, so I didn't hit the target. I never thought about why is it what the depth is or anything.
What's like the different screens they had with the MX white spectra, and they probably have them on a CTX too. I've never really used a lot of the Mind Lab machines for any length of time, but they have these, I call them analysis screens, where they have these bar graphs and this wave looking thing on the V3. It was like after you already found the target, I got to the point, do I really want to go through all these different screens to show me what the signal is in different ways? It is helpful, and they had a couple in there that could discern a bottle cap from a quarter. But all the time I spent hitting all these doggone buttons, I could have already had the target out of the ground and looked at it. So why not just dig it? And that's, if it sounds good, dig it. You don't walk on stuff, because I've done it in the past, Craig. It'll haunt you. I mean, it does. I mean, I have certain targets to this day that haunt me. And one of them was up there in Tennessee when I was hunting with Bill and Tom up there, outside of Nashville. We got this signal on top of the hill. And it was a banging signal with the V6 on both mine and Bill's machine. The V5 wasn't picking it up, and we were digging stones out of the ground. And, we never did find the target, but there was definitely something down in there. And we're on the side of this hill, and it still, it haunts you. You think, man, I wish I knew what that was. I wish we had we were looking for something we can bust that rock. It was these big flat rocks, probably, I don't know, the size of manhole covers, were laid on top of each other and dirt in between. It was weird, Craig. And I've always bugged Tom, if you've gone back up there to see what that is, bring a pick with you or something so you can bust through that rock, because they could have buried something up there. It may be a pile of horseshoes, I don't know. But I know it was a damn good signal, and when Tom couldn't get it with his V5, that shocked me. But the V6s were, and it didn't matter what discrimination level I put it on. I was still getting a signal down in there, but we just couldn't get to it. Even with the shovels and stuff, it was just too hard a ground. But I think they buried something up there myself, and the Confederates were on top of the hill, and they were firing at the Yankees, because it used to be an old road bed. That's where the road used to go, down at the bottom of this big hill, mountain, whatever you want to call it. And they'd sit there and pick them off. We found all kinds of bullets and everything else in that field, and I'd just fire them down there. But yeah, it could have been anything buried up there. The Yankees and the Confederates did that. They didn't want to carry something around. They buried it or whatever, burned it, or, like the 69 caliber bullets you talk about all the time, Craig, finding piles of those. They didn't want to carry those around. They wanted the 58s because they were lighter. So,
well, I mean, a lot of times, people would find random bullets in the middle of nowhere, and they go, why is this one bullet here, and the soldiers were on a march maybe, and they started lightening the load, because each one of those bullets weighed an ounce.
Yeah.
They'd have like probably 40 bullets in their sergeant's box.
Yep.
So they just pitch a couple, every once in a while, especially toward the end of the day, probably.
Oh, they always wonder. I get to, why was there so many drop bullets? If somebody's firing at you, it's awful hard to have precision about putting that bullet in that gun, because you got to ramrod it down there. So you're going to drop a lot trying to get them together.
There's another reason. Sometimes the bullets were too big.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
They weren't done right. But I've seen. I saw one the other day where I think it was an infield, and it was flared, and they think it was put in backwards.
That's weird.
So I don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of effects. With all the stuff we're talking about tonight, we've gotten kind of deep on some of this, but don't ever. I've hunted with guys that had 1 year experience that, that they hunt like crazy all year long, and they know more than somebody with 5 years experience. I mean, experience really don't. You can't really count it so much in years. I mean, it's what you do in the hobby, I guess, if you're out there all the time, and if you've done a lot of research and stuff. Craig's all over the internet all the time, and I have to be sometimes, because I'm busy going to doctor's appointments and everything else, where that's my only link to keep up with what's going on. And then I can apply, if I see something on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and next time I go hunting, I'll try to implement it or see if it works. So, a lot of the way people tell stories, too, of their last hunt or what they were finding or what they did find, you can, by the words they're using or write down, you can sometimes pick out little hints that can help you, be a better, detectorist, kind of improve your skill set. that's what I do. I love videos. I mean, I watch a lot of them, but I try to take the parts that kind of fit in. That's what I've always done in the way I hunt, what I do with the detector, how I set it up. I mean, with that whites almost cost me a divorce. My wife will tell you that. I used to drive her insane with that damn detector because I would spend just as much time messing with settings on that thing as I would hunting with it. But I wanted to understand I wanted to get my mind wrapped around how it was working and what I can do differently to make that machine just squeeze all the power, all the sensitivity, whatever I could out of it. And once I achieved that, it not that it bored me. I knew the machine, but I spent 3.5 years with that machine. But it used to drive her crazy, beep 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 beep, moving everything around until she started making me wear my headphones in the house because I could take the lower detecting shaft off of it and everything. And I'd sit in the chair and I'd start moving settings and making my own settings because you can store a bunch of them in there. And that's how I kind of figured out. I'd be on the Whites forum. And I'd be talking to the guys on there, and they said, well, I made this adjustment. You tried. Okay. That was a very interactive machine. It got a lot of people interested in the social media part of it. Back in 2000, and I think it was 2008, 2009, with the forums and stuff. And that's one thing, too, Craig. I don't see it. Maybe I just haven't surfed around a lot. Forums used to be really popular. Now it's like, I don't know, we used to have one. We don't have it anymore, but I don't see a lot of the forums up, and I don't see a lot of people traveling to those. Those are, it's more of Instagram and Facebook and, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's just trending one way or another, but when the Whites came out with the Spectra V3, that was, to me, the high time of the forum because we were all after information on how to set this machine up better because there's like 2,000 different adjustments you can make on that machine. And,
that was one of the most complicated machines. It's like this guy Francis I talked to, and he's down in Southern Virginia, and he I think you talked to him too, and he I think a pawn shop had almost like a brand new E3i, and he got it for real cheap, and I guess the coil was out of balance or something.
Yeah, null. They call it null.
It turned out, but. So he calls me and he goes, "You ever heard of this machine?" I said, he said, "Man, I got it for this much." I said, "So you're a programmer, huh?" He goes, "What?" And I go, "You're a programmer, huh?" And he goes, I said, "You like programming with computers, right?" And he's like, "Well, no." And I don't, not really. And so it's like, well, then I said, I said, my friend's got, pretty expert on that. And I said, that thing will drive you crazy. You can do. I said, you can do too many adjustments with that machine.
Yeah, my wife used to say the only thing that thing wouldn't do is cook dinner for me. She used to call. I had my beach bunny detector. See, I had my mistress was the the White Spectra, and the Beach Bunny was the Beach Hunter ID. My wife had names for all these, and she goes, "Not one of them. All that stuff it can do, and it still can't make you dinner like I can." I said, "Yep, you're right." But yeah, that machine it was a great. Craig, to be honest with you, I'd tell people to get them if they could, only because it'll teach you a hell of a lot about how you're using it. You can see the difference when you make the adjustment. It's like a hands-on learning situation. You can see the differences in what it does when you start messing with the correlate and the recovery delay and everything. A lot of people don't realize when you move recovery delay faster, that affects depth. I mean, if you got too fast, you're not going to get those deeper items quickly. If you leave it slower, you got to work the coil slower, but it's going to get deeper on it. But you got to give it a chance to get deep to send the signal back to the machine. It only takes milliseconds, but if you're ripping that coil across the ground and you have a very slow recovery delay, when that machine beeps, you're already 6 inches past the target. And that was I think it was the UFX. You had MXT, UFX, DFX, and then a Spectra V3. Those are the models I can remember. But I think it was the UFX was more for relic hunting, had a very slow recovery delay. And I saw a really good video, and they put the quarter down, and they ran the coil over the quarter. And when that machine would make the beep, wasn't when the quarter was in the center of the coil on the swing. It was 6 inches past the coil. So you can imagine if you're swinging really fast, it could be anywhere from halfway to all the way to the left before you'd get a signal on it, and you have to come back and work slower anyways, if the machine would even pick it up to begin with. So you had to work the machine slower because it was set in stone on that one, on that machine that recovery delay was. Whereas like the Deus or the Equinox or Bliss Tool or whatever, it's lightning fast. When you're in the center of that coil, that detector's going off saying there is a target there. You know, that we can do these recovery delay tests where we line everything up and it's making a beep on every single one of them. You know, it's hitting each individual target. This in recovery delay, it's the amount of time it takes it to release one target to take the tone of the next target. It gets more technical, but you have to understand how it works so you know how to adjust your detector, or you're going to be missing targets and not even know it. And that's why
that works better. If it works better in trash and nails, you know, if you got a lot of junk in the ground, you can kind of pick stuff out. That's what, you know, the Equinox and the Deus do so well, is that, you know, you can pick, you know, through the iron.
Right.
You know, they got
surgical performance.
Like they're calling it. They got these programs now. They call it sifter. You know, you're sifting through the junk, you know, to get the good stuff. Mm-hmm. I started learning at first I heard about it was over in England, you know, because they got, you know, thousands of years of, you know, iron in the ground.
Oh yeah, all kinds of different.
But you know, they're using this, you know, different sifter programs, and you know, a lot of this stuff, you know, if you're in a high area of iron, you can't use a lot of power because it's just not going to work. You're not going to be able to pick out, you know, stuff in the iron. I found that in my yard. I had to turn it, you know, when I tuned it down, all of a sudden, machine, you know, the Bliss tool started just, you know, getting signals everywhere. And I kept thinking, you know, I need to go more, you know, get more depth. But, you know, there was just so much iron in the ground and chinkers and coal and stuff that, you know, it's hard to deal with that kind of stuff with detectors, you know. And when I quiet the machine up, all of a sudden I'm starting to hear these, you know, signals coming through. If you go too much power, it's crazy. Dampens the machine. Yeah, it actually, and you know, if you have too much going in the ground, there's a signal to noise ratio effect along with the inverse square ratio. Those are the two things that affect depth. And if you're putting too much power into the ground, you get feedback and you get noise, and it just blanks the deeper targets, you know, completely. You won't even hear them.
Yep.
And I see a lot of guys, they run sensitivity too high, and they're getting all these little tweets and pops, and you know, if you're in like a cellar hole area or something, you got to have that machine running quiet, you know, where you can pick out the discriminant signals versus the all metal, you know, the iron signals.
Well, you can't sit there and worry about depth so much in those situations either, Craig, because you have to think about it this way: if you can get 4 inches down in the ground or 5 inches down in the ground, but if you know, you got to think about this: that's 4 or 5 inches down in the ground you can get in a quiet, stable situation versus turning up your gain and not even being able to get deeper than that because of all the noise. You got to take what you can get.
You might not even get, you know, 3 inches.
Right. You got to take what you can get. Stable all the time. You know, some people run their machines, and I have run my machines chatty. They call it chatty over in Europe. You know, just that a lot more noise, a lot more. But it gets to be, it messes with your ears sometimes to the point where you can't stay in that because it's going to drive you nuts. It's, you know, I've had plenty of guys, some of these places I hunt, you know, Mark Hoover would tell you, or Mike Miller or whatever. I've taken him to this spot. I'm talking about this old parking lot. It's been a parking lot since 1800s for horses and carriages and everything else over by the church I go to. And, you know, I found just tons of coins and tons of this and that, button spills, everything else. But most guys will walk in there and throw their hands up in the air in the first 20 minutes. It is absolutely nuts with targets. and they're iron and nails and they're all this other. It's the trashiest place I'd ever hunted. But that's what I've worked in. That's what I had to, that's the only places I had to detect for a long time. So I got used to how to set my detector up, but still get depth, but not make it crazy. And I've dug a lot of good stuff in there, but most people come in there and hunt that for 10 or 20 minutes, and we're going to have to go somewhere else. I can't do this, and that's because they don't have the right settings for that situation. I try to tell them, but it's a two-edged sword too. I told like I told Mark and Mike both, it's a real busy site. So the first thing they did is started moving sensitivity down a little bit. Let's move the discrimination up just a little bit. They're making their adjustments because they understand what they have to do for that situation. But for somebody that's used to hunting farm fields, and I bring them in that situation, they're ready to choke me out. But there's good stuff there. I don't want to pass it up. Craig, it's like your yard. You can hunt that a million times, but this thing was, if you didn't dig 100 holes at this site, and I still do, I could still go there now and dig, stuff out of there. It's I don't know what it's going to be because you never know what you're going to get until you get it out of the ground. But I've dug a lot of cool stuff and a lot of bucket listers there. Barber dimes and shoot rings and just never got a real yet out of there. But I mean, it feels always a possibility. But I got a lot of first time finds. And I did that with the MX or the White Spectre V3. And had to have it set up for that. So I know it will do that situation really good. And it was pretty accurate, 7 or 8 inches down in the ground. But I've also dug incredibly deep V nickels. I don't know why, with a concentric coil that's real small, 15 inches down. And the settings I was
probably
using.
Probably a halo.
Yeah, halo could have been. We haven't even talked about that on the show in a long time. Halo effect, and there's certain items too. You and a lot of us relic hunters will do this. You get in a weird signal, stomp the ground one good time, or sit your shovel in it, and just pop the ground a little bit, and either the signal's going to still be there, or you're going to break that halo, and the signal's going to go away. Iron targets sometimes do that. You can stomp on the ground with the heel of your boot, and the signal either
copper, lead,
yep,
brass, nickels. The nickels have a little bit of copper in them, and
yep.
Some of them you see, the old ones, they're like green and they got like carbuncles all over them.
Right.
But those if you're out on like a real dry day, you might not hear those deep ones, but when it's wet and that the water hits or the moisture hits those coins, with that corrosion on them,
yeah, it leaches out.
It kind of. The corrosion kind of surrounds into the soil around it. I don't know if anybody's ever seen, but I've seen coins that the dirt was green around it, like an Indian head penny or a wheat penny sometimes. Mm-hmm. Not always, but I've seen it happen.
Well, these coin balls are the same way, Craig. You get them over in the UK all the time. You always come out, they go, "Oh, we got to break this open, the coin ball or whatever." There's a coin inside there, but that ground all around it's kind of like really. I don't know if it's from the halo effect or whatever, the erosion, not erosion, aluminum, oxidization of the item in the ground. You know what I mean? It kind of, like lead. The lead ball gets, the old ones are white. They get that white patina on them. It's like the lead leaching out in there. Well, it makes, in the ground, instead of that bullet being its normal size, it makes the detector think it's even a bigger target because it leaches out around it. But once you dig that, break that halo.
As soon as the air hits it, it's gone.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, but it's also too when you're digging down, sometimes you won't hear it.
I remember a long time ago when the older machines, you get a signal and it'd be like a horseshoe or something, and then as soon as it broke, it hit the air, it would not sound the same at all.
Right.
The old machines had trouble discriminating. It's just amazing, how good the machines are back, compared to what I had when I first started. God.
Well, it's like that 5.3 coil. Usually my average depth was probably 5 inches, maybe 7 on a good day. But with that one, a 15-inch V nickel, it had to have a heck of a halo. It's making the detector. It has more to pick up. It's more of a surface area. It's more of a. Instead of being nickel size, it may have been the detector was seeing as a silver dollar size target of nickel, but it wasn't changed. The VDI number was fine, but it was just making the machine. It's a way of that.
Yeah,
But once that's
like
broken, you can't. It won't do that. It won't pick up a coin that deep. Sometimes people make these really incredible finds of small items, but there might be a heck of a halo around it. So normally, if you couldn't get it at 5 or 6 inches, and you're digging it at 10 or 12, that one time on that particular kind of target, it was just the halo that item had around it in the ground that was helping it along, or whatever, helping your detector detect it. That's the way I look at it anyway. But we got really deep on this show. It's almost 10 o'clock, Craig. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, we'll probably wrap it up for tonight. And usually, shoot, I just had to bring. Oh, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the coffee with Derek and Craig on Mondays and Fridays. We're trying to do it on Wednesday mornings too, at 7 a.m. We just never know what we're going to talk about on those particular shows. We just kind of go with it and just sitting down and literally having a cup of coffee and talking to y'all and talking to each other. So, check those out. And of course, we do our evening shows Thursdays and Saturday nights at 8 p.m. You can check us out on Facebook. Craig's been working with that, and Instagram. That's something new to me, but I'm still, kind of plundering my way through it. Craig does it all the time. Of course, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/hardcore metal detecting. We're doing some stuff on there, looking for people to, support us on Patreon. And I'm trying to think what else, Craig. I think that's about it, right, brother? As far as what we have going on.
Yeah, well, we got the Facebook page, Hardcore Metal Detecting. And,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, we got news. I post stuff on Instagram and there all the time. So, there's always something to watch.
I'm gonna try to get those deer pictures I have. I mean I couldn't believe those 2 deer came in the yard like that this morning. That was kind of cool. Maybe I'll see them tomorrow morning too. But I got a little video. I'll work with that a little bit tonight. See if I can't get that thing. When in doubt, I'll call my daughter. She's a computer guru person. She knows her way around. She'll help me out with that. But but yeah, check us out. Our Facebook pages and everything. Make sure you like and follow the show, and check out that Patreon page and let us know what you think of it. And I guess we'll talk to you all Monday morning, 7 a.m.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Y'all have a good night. Be safe, and God bless.